My Schizophrenic Life, The True Story of Tracy Poe, Part 10, Work, Part 2, Chapter 43, Butch's Attempt. Butch was a closeted homophobic homosexual, and everybody that worked with him noticed it. He was not married, and every man from his past, Butch knew the guy's penis size and would go out of his way to describe it. He would be talking about guys from the Navy, and he would say, and he had a dick on him, holding up his fingers to indicate a length. Butch had been in the Navy, and I truly believe he was kicked out for being a homosexual. Butch had every certificate he ever earned on the wall of his office, but did not have one from the Navy saying he was honorably discharged. Butch would go out of his way to touch your skin. John described wrapping some old rubber seals in tape with him, where John was holding the seals, and Butch was wrapping the tape, and he said every time Butch came around the seal with the tape, he would touch John's hand. John described how soon he was holding the seals at the bottom to try to get away from him, and still he would touch his hands. And then I had to hold a stack of seals, and he did the exact same thing to me. He kept touching my hands even when I was holding the seals by the bottom like John had done. Then one time I was wrapping seals in tape with him, and he had to go talk on the phone, and I quickly wrapped the seals with tape by myself, which was easy to do, and Butch came back and said, "God, I wanted to help you do that." Before Butch was the Houston manager, he managed a district in New Mexico. The current manager from New Mexico had worked with Butch for years. He was useless. We sent him some cutting arms for a section mill, and he could not get them to fit, so he ground them with a grinder and finally got them in the tool. He sent the tool out to a drilling rig, and they sent it back because the cutting arms were in backwards. That guy came to Pearland once, and he dressed exactly like Butch, with polyester gray dress slacks, a white dress shirt, and he even had oxblood-colored cowboy boots. Working in the theater, I had worked with a lot of gay men. This guy was gay. He walked gay, and he sounded gay. There is nothing wrong with being gay. I have had many gay friends and acquaintances. But when as a manager you try to use your authority to force someone into an unwanted sexual encounter, that is a big problem. That is sexual harassment in the workplace. I was told that I needed to work on a Saturday by Butch. He had an important shipment to go out that day. Butch also wanted to dress a roller reamer, which is a drilling tool that stabilizes the drill string. It has 3 rollers that go in it held in with a big pin that was itself held in place by small cross pins. So, I came in and Butch gave me the packing slip, and I put the order together in cardboard boxes and put it on a pallet and shrink wrapped it like he said to do. Then Butch came out there and told me to take off the shrink wrap and add a part to a box that was on the pallet. My plan was to cut a small hole in the shrink wrap, add the part to the box, then shrink wrap the whole thing again. Butch came out there and saw what I was doing and yelled, "No, goddamn it!" I said, "Take the shrink wrap off. We are not going to do a patch job." I was not doing a patch job as I was going to fully wrap the palletized materials with shrink wrap again. You would have never seen the hole and it would have been stronger. Him yelling at me on a Saturday set me off. I was hearing voices and got upset, and as I was removing the shrink wrap like he had yelled at me about, he began lecturing me that I had to do as he said without question. I began complaining and was really shaken. Seeing me upset made Butch happy. He was smiling at me while I was upset and complaining. So, the truck arrives, and it has a shipping container on the back. Butch took pictures of the pallet and had me load it into the shipping container. Inside the shipping container were already some big drilling bits just set in there. There was no way that shrink-wrap pallet was going to survive with those loose bits on an overseas journey. That is why John always built plywood boxes. That way the parts are protected. But Butch did things his own way, and no one could advise him of anything because he thought he knew best. I was upset at getting yelled at and hearing voices, but as always, I hid that fact. Then Butch said that we had to dress a roller reamer, but first he needed me to hold a seal ring so he could measure it. The seal ring was about 2 feet in diameter. It was about 3 inches wide and made of 1/2 inch metal. It had 4 holes drilled into it that were supposed to be equally spaced along the ring. Butch wanted to measure the length between the holes with a tape measure because they were off. You could see they were off when you put it on the drilling head and the holes did not line up. There was no need to measure them. Also, I would have had no problem measuring all that by myself, as it was not hard to hold the ring and put the end of the tape measure in the hole with one hand and run the tape down the ring to measure the next hole with the other hand. It was not that hard to do. but I had to hold the ring for Butch. I was holding the ring and Butch would take the tape measure and put the end of it in the hole and then draw the tape out and measure the distance between the holes. Every time he drew the tape down the ring, he would press his body into mine, then tell me to turn the ring and do it again. This should have happened 4 times because there were only 4 holes, but Butch wanted to go around the ring again. And again, he would press his body into mine as he drew out the tape. He wanted to go around a 3rd time, and I asked what he was doing. Then he says that when he was young, a man came up to him in a bus station and showed him a picture of a guy performing oral pleasure. Then he stood there and stared into my eyes. He had the same glassy-eyed look on his face as Dan, the youth minister, did when he grabbed my pants when I was 14. This was too much for me. I was hearing voices that were saying, "He is going to get you," in a menacing tone. I told him I was feeling sick and had to leave, and I left. Butch kept notes on everyone when they did anything wrong, and he kept these notes in a desk drawer. He did this because he knew that someone someday would complain about him, so he wanted insurance. We would look through his drawer when he was gone, and I found the note from that day, and he had said in the note that I became upset over having to shrink, wrap a pallet twice, and had left work early. In the note, he said he told me that he would have to call John in to dress the tool, but that I had left anyway. This was a lie. He never said anything about John. I left because he wanted to have a sexual encounter with me that day, and his abusiveness had me hearing voices. When I got to work the next Monday, as usual, I was the first one there besides Butch. Butch was complaining about me leaving Saturday and said, "How did you ever make it through boot camp?" And I shot back, "They did not let homosexuals in boot camp." He then told me that the next time there was a layoff, which happens often in the oil field, I was going to be the first to go. There was a temporary worker that was at ABFZ Oil Tools in Pearland for a while that had gotten hired at the Houston district. His name was John also. He had gotten laid off after a few months, as is common in the oil field. He came back to Pearland and Richard hired him as a mechanic like me, the welder. Donnie liked the new John and did not really like me much. He tried to train the new John to be a welder, but the new John did not want any part of the heat and the smoke. One time, I had to be at a wedding on the weekend. My friend from 3rd grade, David, was getting married to his girlfriend, Rachel, and I was the best man. The new John told me he was coming in on Sunday to dress a tool. I asked Butch if I could leave early as I had to be at a bachelor party that night, and he let me go 30 minutes early. He was outside with me as I was getting in my car, and I told him I would see him on Sunday, and he told me not to worry about it, that the new John and him would handle it. I went to the bachelor party and was at the wedding the next day, and by Sunday I was exhausted. The new John called me Sunday morning, and I told him I was not coming in. Butch had told me not to worry about it. That Monday, as usual, I was the first to arrive after Butch, who was always early. When I walked in the door, I saw Butch and said, "Good morning, sir," like I always did. He shot up from his chair and said, "You asshole, you little fuck," and did a skip step towards me and shot the finger. Then he said, "Do you want to hit me?" I said, "No." Then he scolded me when he saw I would not fight him and said that I would be fired if I did it again. I did not know what he was talking about. He told me on Friday not to worry about anything. I told the old John and he said I should call Human Resources. So I did and explained what happened, and the Human Resource manager said, "Well, Tracy, last time you said not to worry about it." I said, "That was Donnie. This is Tracy." Butch had tried to pick a fight with the welder Donnie one day in the past, and Donnie had called the Human Resource manager about it, but had said he did not want to do anything but wanted to report it to him. WR came to Pearland and lectured Butch, then called Donnie in there, and a while later, Donnie came out mad. Then he called me in there and was holding all the papers that Butch had made with notes about us. He said, "I had no idea he was having problems with you." I told WR most of the papers he had were lies, and I told him what he had done, and WR said, "But he has 25 years. And I told him I did not want Butch to go, but I was tired of him always saying he was going to fire me. WR left, and Butch's attitude changed for a while. He was not as abusive as usual. I learned later through old John that they had fired the Human Resources director over the incident because he wanted to fire Butch for fighting. Chapter 44, Welder. The welder Donnie had begun to use cocaine intravenously. Then he would weld with short sleeves on for a while and spark bite his arms to hide his track marks. He would talk about doing cocaine to the new John and me. He asked us how we did our cocaine, and I told him that I did not like cocaine. I did not tell him that I tried it once and it made me hear voices. The new John said he liked to do crystal meth. Donnie became erratic in his behavior, and he missed work one day and did not call in. Then a few days later, he asked Butch for a raise, and Butch told him that because he was missing work and not calling in, that he could not have a raise. So Donnie, the welder, quit. WR was mad and figured it was because Butch was abusive, so he said that Butch could not hire a new welder. So, I became the new welder at ABFZ Oil Tools, as the new John did not want anything to do with it. I had worked in the welding shop for 4 years and had done everything but hold the torch. It was not only something that I could do, but it was also something which I was good at. Butch begrudgingly said that he would get me some more money, but he never did. And I worked as a welder for 6 more months at $8 an hour. ABFZ Oil Tools got bought out by France Industries, and we all received Franz-labeled coveralls for a uniform. Word came down that they were going to close the Pearland facility and move over 1,000 tools that were at Pearland to Franz in Houston. After about a month, Franz sent a Cajun guy to our location to assess the workers there. Me and old John had a few Cajun music tapes we would play on a boombox in the shop, so we played them when that assessor was around. The assessor liked me. On the last day he was there, he gave us all a test. He picked a huge 36-inch diameter roller reamer that had the pin bushings frozen in the tool so that they could not be knocked out with a hammer. They had to be cut out by a welder with a torch so that new ones that made the tool the proper diameter could be put in it. I had to cut them out, and I cut them out perfectly and did not damage the tool. This was something that even Donnie the old welder could not do, as he always left gouges in the bushing pockets. The assessor asked Butch how much I made an hour, and when he told him $8 an hour, he was instructed to raise my wage to $10 an hour, and word came down that they were going to pay to move me to Franz in Houston. A month went by, and Butch had not raised my pay, so I asked him about it. He acted all weird and had me watch him call Franz in Houston to get the form for a pay raise. He had a form on the new John to raise his pay that he showed me as an example. I began to make $10 an hour finally. The new John told me that he had been making $9 an hour, but was told not to tell me. Butch liked the new John because he kissed his ass, and that is why he had had a form to give him a raise. Butch hated me because I spurned him sexually. A few months earlier, there was a good-looking guy that was a temporary worker working with us at Pearland for a while. He told me that he had been a saturation diver and had been given the wrong gas on a dive and suffered an aneurysm. He was not right in the head. He got kicked out of a grocery store once for wearing boxer underwear, no shirt, and cowboy boots inside the store. He always talked about how sexual he was and would brag about his manhood size. He gave me a tough time, and he could not do anything right as far as work was concerned, so I had to pull his weight and mine as well while he was there. Because he was a good-looking young man, Butch loved him, even though he was a terrible worker. The guy called us all over to see some tools he had painted and brag about them. When we went to load them into a truck for shipment, we discovered they were not painted on the bottom. John, my old boss, called him over and said, "Look at these tools. They are not even painted right after you verbally masturbated about them." My old boss John had been a Marine in Vietnam and was on the same type of howitzer I was on and had a warped sense of humor. The temporary guy was useless. But Butch loved him because he looked good. He soon quit because he was not right in the head. Chapter 45, First Poisoning. The new John quit, and when he did as he was leaving, he was upset because he told us that his quitting had made Butch happy. He had gotten a job cutting concrete and talked to old John later and said it felt so good to be quitting and to leave Butch behind. That left just 3 of us at Franz, former ABFZ Oil Tools, in Pearland, Butch the old John and me. Right after the new John quit, Butch took a vacation which was unheard of. Butch would give his workers a tough time if they tried to use their vacation, and the worker would have a tough time getting it approved and usually had to have the human resources manager step in. He had done that to Donnie the welder and to me about 2 years earlier. I had been there for 5 years by this time, the first year as a temporary and 4 years as a full-time employee. I started there in 1989 and it was 1994. Things were seemingly going well after Butch's vacation was over. Butch was in a good mood and everyone was getting along. I was a welder making $10 an hour. John was doing quality control checking parts that came back from the machine shops. I was mainly rebuilding under reamer cutting arms that had to be filled with grease, then welded up and vacuum tested. I had been doing this kind of work for a few years now and knew what I was doing. Everything was going well except I started to have heart problems. Occasionally, it would feel like I was having a heart attack. I took some aspirin one time while my heart was acting up and thought I was going to die. The voices got worse because of this. I used to make little beaded deerskin pouches and things and would work on them at lunch. I was working on a pouch for a girl from my old neighborhood and was sewing a leather pouch and noticed Butch was smiling at me. He was happy, and I thought that it was odd. I had a fishing tackle box with my beading supplies in it that I kept in the break room, which was in the offices up in the front of the building. John was taking time off to go to the doctor, and when Butch would tell me John was going to be gone because of this, he would be happy and smile about it. He used to be a jerk if anyone needed time off. I remember feeling like I was having a heart attack one day. I never said anything about it. That day I saw John with a cup of coffee, and he had a weird look on his face and threw the coffee out of the cup out the door in the back of the shop. He left early that day. The next day, a guy from France they called Gizmo was working with us, and I felt fine all day. The next day, Gizmo was gone. I came in, and Butch had laid out about 20 used cutter arms that needed to be welded up where there was wear on them, then ground flat again. I grabbed a cup of coffee and went out into the shop to weld these arms up. Suddenly, I felt like I was having a heart attack again, but I kept working. It was bad this time, and I struggled to keep working. There was an inspector there to inspect the arms as I welded them up and ground them off for any cracks, as was the usual procedure. I was using a stick welder with the prescribed electrodes of a certain kind of metal that matched the base metal of the arms I was welding. The inspector said my rods are sizzling like there is moisture in them. "You might need new ones," he said. I was still feeling bad, and my heart was beating out of my chest. I went up to the office to tell Butch what was going on with the welding rods, and when I met him in the hallway of the office, he was smiling ear to ear and said all excited and drawn out, "How's it going, dude?" This caused something to click in my brain. He was acting so happy while I thought I was dying. I went to John and said, "Don't drink the coffee. I think he is putting something in it." John said he was having heart problems also, and that he had taken some aspirin for it and thought he was going to die. This was the exact same thing that happened to me. And John said that 2 days ago, when he was feeling bad and left early, that his wife and her friend had taken his blood pressure and it was extremely high. John had been going to the doctor for a while now. We both got suspicious of Butch, and we went to the Pearland police station at lunch. We described to 2 detectives what was going on, and they said they would need samples of the coffee grounds. They had us fill out a form, and on the back, you had a space to describe what was going on. The detective looked at me in my welding clothes and said, "Just do the best you can with it." And I told him I was college educated and filled out the form. They asked, was it coming out of both ends when we said the coffee made us sick? And we said no. It felt like a heart attack. The detective asked what we thought it was, and John said he was unsure, but I said, "I think he is trying to kill me. He has wanted to fire me for years, and now they are going to pay to move me to the new location." Butch kept clean jars in a storage room full of small parts, and I had taken a sample of the coffee I drank and put it in a clean jar. We went back to work, and I took the can of coffee grounds and the liquid sample I had drank back up to the police station. When I got back from lunch, I was still having heart problems. I took a second jar of coffee for myself. Then Butch had me mow the grass on the riding lawn mower in the heat of summer. John stopped drinking the coffee and never had another heart attack-like episode after that. I kept getting sick with chest pains when I did certain things, but never as bad as when I was drinking the poisoned coffee. The box I had my beads in that I was using when Butch was smiling made me feel sick. I thought that he had poisoned that as well. John kept his mouth shut about it, but I told everyone. I told Butch's new boss at Fran's, who was a guy named Ralph. I called Human Resources and told them. I told all my friends. The next day, John was not there, and occasionally on that day, my heart would glitch. So I said I had to go to the doctor also, and left Butch there by himself. I went home and called the family doctor, and the nurse that answered the phone told me if I was having chest pains to go to the emergency room. So I went to the new hospital by San Jack South and went to the emergency room. When I was called back to see the doctor, I explained that I drank some coffee at work and thought it was poisoned and had been having chest pains. The doctor thought I was making it all up and treated me badly. He said, "Why didn't you go to your doctor?" And I told him my doctor told me to come to the emergency room. The nurse put an EKG monitor on my heart. While the machine ran for the minute that they checked it, my heart did not glitch. The doctor said my heart was fine. I asked if it got worse, should I come back, and the doctor rudely said, "No." Then a nurse came to me in the hallway and told me to come back if I kept having problems and gave me some paperwork. The doctor did not believe my story and thought I was trying to defraud them, and it upset me. The whole time all this was going on, I was dealing also with voices in my head, but I never told anyone about the voices because I did not want to look crazy. Because I had complained to everybody that would listen, Human Resources at Franz sent 2 people from a company that did environmental testing. They put a device on me that sucked air through a cloth circle, then they would test the circle of cloth for contaminants. When they first came in that morning, I was not there, but arrived just in time to hear Butch talking about a welder who had gotten sick from the fumes at work. Butch had me run some TIG repairs on a drive bushing that had some damage. I would generally fix these with the MIG wire feed welder, but Butch wanted me to run TIG because he thought it produced more smoke. It took all of 3 minutes to weld up that bushing and another 3 minutes to grind it back into shape. Then I was just rebuilding under reamer arms that did not require welding at that time. There is a little spot where you must weld a ball bearing plug-in on an under-reamer arm, but that comes after you build them. And when you build 10 arms, it takes all day, and there is no welding at that time. One of the people doing the testing was a young lady, and she was complaining that I was not welding, which was what they were there to test for. I told her there were days I was sick when I did not weld at all. She said, "Scary. My uncle had said he was coming to town for a week, and so I put on the calendar that I wanted to take vacation that week. But my uncle canceled his trip for some reason, so I just forgot about it." Butch had gone up to France in Houston for something and had gone to Human Resources. He was trying to get me fired for taking a vacation he did not approve of because the day before it was scheduled on the calendar, some people from France came with a lawyer and went over the findings of the environmental study. They said they had taken us seriously, but basically had found nothing wrong. They said if we had further problems to contact a doctor. I said I have a sample of coffee you can test, as I had taken 2 samples in clean jars from the day we went to the police, but they said, "We want to keep this on the table." They said, if I told anyone that Butch was poisoning me again, I would be fired. After the meeting where they said they did not find anything in the environment that would make us sick, I went back into the shop, and they went into Butch's office to talk to him. I was working in the back, and Butch came up to me and said, "I see you want to take some vacation." I told him that I had canceled those plans. He immediately ran back to the office. I followed a little while later to explain that my uncle had canceled his trip, and when I got in the hallway of the office, I heard him on the phone aggravatedly telling someone that I had canceled my vacation. I had suspected that someone was staying at his house with him ever since he went on vacation, possibly to help him with his poisons. He talked often of a cousin that he was friends with. They would torture dogs and cats by pouring certain chemicals on them. Butch would bring catalogs from Edmonton Scientific to work with him. They had chemistry supplies in them for sale. His cousin was helping him poison me. He kept having me drive the truck, and although I did not run the air conditioner, I would get mild chest pains. He would always say to take the truck, sit in the air conditioner, get out of the heat, and get this or that. He used to send John out and would badly overload the truck, having him pick up parts from several locations, but now he would send me out to one location to get something, and come back then out and again to another location to get something, and then back to the first place to get something else. And each time I went out I would get chest pains, but not as bad as when I was drinking the coffee. I asked him why he sent me to get parts twice at the same place, and he said that he did not want to overload the truck. I finally figured out he was putting poison on the air conditioner intake that is under the grill behind the hood. One day he brought the key to the truck out to me early in the morning, and I got scared and was hearing voices and said, "Not the truck." He ran in and called his boss Ralph and told him I refused to drive the truck. I went in and said I would drive the truck, and he tried to grab me and push me out of the office, but I clenched my muscles and stood firm, and he was unable to move me. I told him again I would drive the truck, and he sent me to the same machine shop 3 times. but I would open the doors and run the air conditioner a while before I would get in. Ralph came to Pearland that day, and they wrote me up for refusing to drive the truck initially. Then my car was making me have chest pains, and certain welding rods would cause me to have chest pains. They had sent a welder from France that was due to lose his job because of cutbacks in manufacturing, and I was welding in the back, and I got chest pains, and the welder with me asked for an aspirin. I told him aspirin makes it worse. I got a strange rash in between my fingers that had painful small red bumps, and I am convinced this was caused by the poisons. One time at the end of the day, Gizmo was there, and we were leaving, and Butch was berating me. I said that it was no fun to have to go to the hospital. Butch said, "I have lived 50 years and I never poisoned anybody. Maybe it is something at your home." When I got home, I was paranoid and on high alert. I saw a truck pull into the dead end that is a house away from my parents' house. Two guys got out and walked by my house, but I was out in the driveway. They passed my house and then turned around a few houses down when the neighbor's motion detector turned on their porch lights. The two guys got in the truck and left. Then I saw Butch's car speed down the street past my house. It made me paranoid, and I had trouble sleeping due to the warning danger voices echoing in my head that night. Nothing ever came of the police case, so one day at home I called the FBI and told them what was going on and asked, if he went out of state to get poisons, was it a federal crime? I was bad off mentally. I was hearing voices all the time now and felt like I was going to have a nervous breakdown. A day or so after I called the FBI, my friend from the Marines Pendleton called, and this made me feel a whole lot better. He told me he was like me and had shattered his arm and was medically retired from the Marine Corps just before the Gulf War in 1990. He told me he was an EOD, explosives expert, and that he had been stationed at the White House guarding the president. Talking to him really helped me mentally. In my paranoid state, I thought the FBI told him to call me. I was still hearing voices, but I did not feel like I was having a nervous breakdown anymore. My friend David, Rachel his wife, and Brenda his sister could tell I was not well mentally. All I would talk about was being poisoned. One time at a bar near David's home called the Tall Texan we were there, and I was having an episode schizophrenically. I thought the bar was full of Cajuns, and some people I did not know that were talking to me were FBI agents. My friends convinced me to go to the hospital in Bayshore and talk to a psychologist that had helped Brenda with her mental issues. I went in, and the receptionist nurse interviewed me and gave me a test to fill out. Rachel took me to a restaurant, and I had a beer and sat there and filled out the psychological evaluation test. Some people sitting next to us started talking, and it sounded like they were talking about me. Rachel reacted to them also. I thought they were FBI agents. I filled out the test, but lied on it about hearing voices. I said no, I was not hearing voices when I was hearing them every day now. I wanted them to believe me that I was being poisoned, and did not think they would if they thought I was crazy. After I filled out the test, I went back in to see the psychologist. He asked, "So you think someone is trying to kill you?" And I said, "It is a conspiracy. The guy trying to murder me is working with other people." He sent me immediately to the emergency room so I could be admitted right away to the psychiatric ward. They put me on Haldol, Depakote, and Kojunta, and in a day the voices had stopped, but I still believed that I had been poisoned. This has never changed no matter how much medicine I have taken. The psychologist came in 2 days later and talked like I had gotten sick one time and freaked out, and I told him I was poisoned repeatedly. That Monday, I had gone in on Friday night. I called Ralph at France, and he asked where I was, and I told him I was in the hospital and asked if I would be fired, and he said, "Not if you are in the hospital." I stayed in the psych ward for the prescribed 5 days that most people stayed there, but they claimed I still had paranoid delusions, so they kept me longer as an outpatient, where I went to my parents' house at night and was in the psych ward all day. I was there a total of 17 days. I was there 5 days as an inpatient and 12 days as an outpatient. I took all the medicine they prescribed me, and still my story never changed one bit. And to this day it has not changed. They never believed me, but eventually gave up and released me. I went back to work, but Butch complained that he could not sleep with me there, and they laid me off, saying that every welder with less than 10 years was getting laid off. I tried to say I was never really hired as a welder, and that I did other things, but Ralph said this layoff had come from higher up. Butch sat in the office with Ralph and was holding his mouth funny, trying not to smile. As I was collecting my stuff to leave, I kept saying, Thanks for poisoning me, Butch. Thanks for poisoning me. The welder who had been working there from France said that he felt something bad also and held his arm in a strange way to his chest. Ralph told Butch in front of me to call him if I ever threatened him. I pleaded with Ralph that if he ever started getting sick to check out Butch, because if he did it to me, he would do it to you. The saddest part of this whole deal was that my mother was suffering from Alzheimer's while this was going on, and I was not able to be strong for her and support my family. Chapter 46, MCFA. Because I was laid off from France, I could get unemployment benefits, so I applied and got them. For about 4 months, I stayed mostly at my parents' house, and while my father was at work, I cared for my mother. Less than a month after I was laid off from France, and while I was at my father's house watching my mother, I got a phone call from John, my old boss from ABFZ Oil Tools in France. He told me Butch had been fired. He had come into the break room a few minutes after 8 a.m. and had yelled at everybody to go to work. He had done this on several occasions at Pearland. They took John into a room and asked him about Butch, and John told me that he had spilled his guts. He told them about all the abuse and that he had picked fights with workers, and they had fired the human resources manager over it. They told Butch that he was suspended, and he had asked if he could come in on the weekend and do some work, and they told him, "If you come back to work, you will be arrested." Because I had told everyone at France what he was doing, nobody wanted him in their department, and he was then permanently fired. When my father was home, I went to Paul's, David's friend that had been in the Navy, house, because my father did not want me to drink beer anymore. After 4 months of helping my father take care of my mom, my father's mother, my grandmother, had come and helped him, and I moved out and lived at Paul's. 3 months later, my grandmother said she feared my mom and my mom had to go into the hospital full time. Paul told me that I should stop taking my meds, and I listened to him because the Haldol and Depakote made me have blurry vision and made beer taste bad. The voices came right back, but I drank beer and passed out drunk every night. I had a friend that I met at ABFZ Oil Tools who was a temporary there for a while, and we had been in the Society for Creative Anachronism together, where we would pretend to be from the Middle Ages and fight with fencing swords. He had been in the Navy and was looking for a job, and so was I. And he told me that we as veterans could get a job recommendation from the Texas Employment Commission, where I had gone to register for unemployment. There they gave me 2 recommendations. I told them I was a welder, what area I lived in, and those are the types of jobs they sent me on. The first job was at a small shop that made gears, but they had a guy there that looked like he was getting hired to be their welder. The boss there was still impressed with me because I wore my Franz coveralls that made me look like a race car driver or an astronaut, but I did not get a job there. The next place was to a temporary service that hired personnel for Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America. They gave me a written welding test, which I failed because it was the terms you would learn at school, and I had never been to school for welding. For instance, they asked what GMAW stands for, and I did not know that it was gas-shielded metal arc welding. However, they also gave a blueprint reading test that I did pass with flying colors. It showed a bushing location that was offset 2 degrees. So, I got hired as a welder, making $8.50 an hour. I went to work there in January of 1995. On the first day, there were other welders that had been hired there also. We waited in the first office you came to when you came in from the weld shop. The weld shop was huge and had 70 welders working at a time. My supervisor Rico got me and took me to the back of the shop down a main aisle that was busy with forklifts. We got to the head guard department and Rico said, "Here is your new welder." And the crew leader Leonardo said, "I don't need a welder, I need someone to clean head guards." I said, "I can do that." And I started cleaning the weld spatter from head guards. I was only making $8.50 an hour, but was working lots of overtime and making good money for me in 1995. Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America was on the West Beltway, so I was living with Paul, whose house was in town. It was a lot closer than my father's house that was on the East Beltway, but was still far away. I used the money from my first few paychecks to buy a 90-gallon fish aquarium and put it in Paul's house. I stocked it with all kinds of fish. I talked to my mother on the phone when I first moved over there, and she was lucid and asked about my work, and I told her about my new job. I was crying. 2 months later, she was in hospice care. This guy, Alan, who was my friend David's sort of boss, his family owned the business, had brought a guy named Brad to live at Paul's house. Brad was working for Alan, and David worked at a different location. The general contractor they worked for built apartments all over Houston at the time. Brad was horrible to live with. He was Alan's boy toy. Alan smoked crack and frequented ladies of the night and always bragged about how much money he made. It made living there hard, and I had to put locks on everything. My swords from my time at the Society for Creative Anachronism had disappeared. My mother was in hospice care, and I went to see her there twice. The first time I was alone. She looked at me, and I saw she recognized me, but soon her eyes changed, and she did not acknowledge that I was there anymore. I did not stay long. The second time I went, my father and brother were there, and I stayed a little longer. About a week later, my father called me at Paul's and said my mother had passed away. He said she went peacefully. Back at Paul's, I had put locks on the door to my room and on my gas cap on the truck my father had just given me when my mother had died. Brad was jealous and would mess with it. Brad also put milk in the fish tank and almost killed all the fish. David got a promotion working for the general contractor, and Alan peed in his gas tank out of jealousy. David had pulled into his parents' garage, and while his truck was running, you could smell it. That is what Brad was doing to my truck. Brad and Alan would talk about stealing my truck. Things were not going well for me at Paul's house, and the stress was causing me to hear voices other than the usual weather radio voices I heard when I drank beer. I came to call these voices the warning danger voices because the voices would say things like, "They are going to get you," and "Watch out." I was working at Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America and had gotten a new supervisor who was a woman named Carol. She would hold little meetings for all the head guard workers in the break room. There was an area at the front of the weld shop called Special Projects. Every area had a sign, and this is what the sign for that area said. Special Projects was run by Shaw. He was a Muslim man originally from Trinidad. One day he was in the back of the shop trying to get some people to help him on a Sunday. We worked Monday through Saturday. He called out to someone and said, "Hey." I thought he was talking to me, and I said, "Yes?" He went to the person he was calling and asked if they wanted to work Sunday, and the guy said that he did not, so Shaw asked me, and I said sure. Special Projects did a lot of things, but the main thing they did was manufacturing engineering. They built things to help workers build forklifts like conveyors with rollers, specialized carts to move parts, and safety railings to keep workers away from the welding robots. So, on Sunday, I worked with Shaw repairing a conveyor that had some damaged rollers, and then made some conveyor stands. The next day, Monday, Carol came back to where I was cleaning head guards and told me to report to Special Projects because I would be working for them for a while. I got to Special Projects, and there was another temporary welder working there for the first time also. There were 2 permanent Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America workers at Special Projects also. Me and the other temporary welder were making carts to hold the wire feed, part of a MIG welding machine. We were using a plasma cutter to cut a 1/4-inch plate to make the carts. In the middle of it, a supervisor from the frame department came and got the temporary welder working with me and put him to work in the frame section. The temporary welder that had been working with me was going to put the handle real low on a cart we were making with just some 1-inch square tubing to hold it. But he was gone now, so I nervously cut 2 custom brackets that brought the handle up higher. Shaw saw me and asked if I was making brackets for the handle, and I said, yes. He told me the brackets looked good and left me to it. The crew leader from Head Guards, Leonardo, came up to Special Projects and tried to get me back because he said I was a good worker, but Shaw would not let him have me. Temporary workers would come through and work at Special Projects and then get sent to other areas of the factory, but I stayed. Shaw liked me, and it was a pleasure working for him. I was terrified they would find out what had happened to me at France, but they never did. Although, the head of security began sitting at my table in the break room. After 3 months at Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America, I got hired to be a full-time employee. I did not get a raise, but we were reviewed every 6 months and got raises then. I got called into the manager's office, and he said that normally I would be hired for night shift, but that Shaw wanted me as a fitter in Special Projects and let me stay on day shift. Shaw had a lot of influence at Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America. Things were bad at Paul's house. I had made the mistake of telling Alan that Brad had stolen all of Paul's change when he did not have any money, and when Paul confronted him, he had cried. Alan would come over and talk about blindsiding me and would walk around grabbing his crotch and talking smack. I would constantly hear the warning danger voice during these times, and it was unhealthy for me. I had a cat that I had gotten from Jeff the scene designer from University of Houston at Clear Lake Theater, and had taken the cat to Paul's, and the cat hated it there. There was a temporary welder named Craig who was working at Special Projects, and he said he needed to move, and so we got an apartment just across the beltway from the factory. I was moving my stuff out, and Brad had brought some guy over to mess with me about stealing my truck. I had already packed up my stuff and was taking the cat and about to leave. They were laughing and said, "You're taking the cat?" I left and did not look back. Craig and I moved into a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom-mate special apartment on Hammerley Drive, within walking distance of the factory at Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America. My cat named Brindle loved the new apartment. She went crazy in my room, and Craig said, "Your cat is in there tearing up something." She was playing with a piece of newspaper. My father was moving out of the family house in Beverly Hills and had purchased a house in Sugar Land, Texas on the southwest side of Houston where my brother's family lived. This way he could be near his grandkids, and he had too many memories of my mom at that old house. Craig and I went over there while he was packing up to move, and my father gave us some furniture. He gave us 2 twin beds, a small television, and a small 2-seat couch. I also got my gun collection, which was in a red plastic footlocker. Things went well at first. We drank beer every night. I drank at least 12 beers a night and would pass out hearing the weather radio voices mumbling in my head. Craig would drink more than me. Also, he would buy the cat Brindle cat treats and dole them out to her. Then he ran out, and she would meow and beg him for them. I told him, "You created a monster." Craig had a brother in town that he used to live with before moving in with me. His brother and his brother's wife would come over, and Craig would grill on a small barbecue grill he had bought. Then one time his brother's wife came over, and Craig slept with her. She was screaming during this, and the next day the neighbors had broken our window. It was cracked, but not broken all the way out. Craig had made friends with another temporary at Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America that lived in the same apartments. Someone had stolen his spare key, come into his apartment, taken his video game console, and trashed his place. Craig started going out to strip clubs and doing cocaine, and one night he got pulled over for making an illegal lane change. He had missed the exit after being on a cocaine bender at a strip club and swerved across 3 lanes of traffic to try and catch the exit. He was arrested for driving while intoxicated. He called me at the apartment Sunday night, but I would not help him, so he got his brother to bail him out. He missed work Monday, and when I got home that day, he was there. We had to get his truck from a local tow yard. He went to work Tuesday, and Gordon, the superintendent, let him go back to work with no problem. Craig was not doing any work that day and said that everybody knew he had been arrested, and he walked out halfway through the day. He went and applied for a job welding streetlight poles and had aced the test. Craig was a good welder. He was all set to start his new job until they did a background check as a formality and found that he had a pending drunk driving case, and they would not hire him. He needed $800 to pay the court, or he was going to go to jail. I did not have $800 to loan him, and neither did his brother, who had just paid $500 to bail him out of jail. My father and brother were going to go to a casino, and they invited me, and I planned to go. I got home Friday afternoon. We were not working that Saturday as the factory was going to shut down over Christmas. I was driving in the apartment complex, and the usual apathetic gate guard smiled at me. I saw Craig's friend who had had his apartment robbed waiting with a guy sitting in a truck at the front gate. I waved, and he looked at me like a piece of meat. Immediately I became paranoid and heard the warning danger voice say, "They are coming for your things." I went into the apartment, called my father, and told him I could not go to the casino with him and my brother. Craig was not there. About 3 hours later, he came in and threw money at me. He had owed me some money, and he thought I was not going to leave until I got it from him, but I was just plain not leaving at all. This was the last day before the factory shut down for a week, and we were off for the next 7 days. I asked Craig what he was going to do. He was being cryptic and talking in lines we had heard from movies. I gave him his money back and gave him some of my money, and he picked up a trash bag full of his things and left and did not ever come back. The next day his friend came and knocked on the door, but I did not answer it. The apartment was trashed as Craig was messy. I sat in the mess for 2 days and then started cleaning it up. About a week later, some plainclothes police officers came to the apartment looking for Craig. He had missed his court date. I told them he had left town, and they looked around the apartment and left. I told the guys at Special Projects that Craig had left, and Hung, a Vietnamese guy, sent his brother over to my place because Hung did not want him living with him anymore. His name was Twin, and he moved in. The first thing he did was get on the phone, and he would talk for lengthy periods of time. When I got the phone bill, it was $700. He had been calling Vietnam, and that is why Hung did not want him to live with him anymore. He wrote me a check for the money. A bail bondsman came over while I was at work, and Twin was there. He showed Twin a mugshot of Craig, and Twin said he did not know him. He looked around and left. I wish I could have been there, because on a phone bill there were numbers in Louisiana that Craig had called, and I would have given that information to the bond agent because Craig had wanted to steal all my stuff with that other guy that worked as a temporary. Twin lived with me for about 2 months and had a lady friend who would just walk in without knocking. The guy that used to be Craig's friend, who wanted to rob my place, came by again, but when he saw Twin there, he stopped coming over after that and never came back. Twin worked the night shift as a garbage truck mechanic, and I only saw him on weekends mostly. He brought a car that did not run and put it in the parking lot of the apartment complex with an expired registration and a flat tire. Twin used to go and doctor shop and took all kinds of pills. He gave me a pill once when I was drinking beer, and it caused my heart to feel like it was being squeezed. I made pork chops one weekend and gave him one, and the next day he took some of those pills he had given me and was drinking beer, and it affected his heart the same way it did mine. I had made the mistake of telling him that I had been poisoned before. I talk a lot when I am drunk, and I was drunk every night and hearing voices, so I was not in my right mind. Twin accused me of poisoning him, saying he felt his heart getting squeezed and had eaten my pork chop the day before. I tried to tell him it was the pills he was taking along with the beer he was drinking, but he did not believe me. He moved out, and I was glad to see him go. He gave me back his key. He then got a certified letter that I had to sign for. He came over and said someone had taken his car. I told him about the letter, but he would not take it, saying that it was from the court or something. After he was gone, a few days later, I opened the letter, and it was about his car. The apartment management had had it towed because it did not have a current registration and had flat tires. About a month later, I came home, and the window was broken with a piece of glass missing. The missing piece of glass was in the storage closet on the porch. My money was missing from my drawer. I knew that no one could get in my apartment through the broken window because the hole was too small. I told Hung at work that his brother had robbed me. He had given his lady friend a key he had made. That is how she could always just walk right in. I got the locks changed for free with a police report. Hung did not like me saying that his brother had robbed me, so he had him come back over and rob me again. This time the window was completely broken out and glass was tracked all through the apartment. I had hidden my money, and all he took was a checkbook. At work the next day, Hung was walking around with a smile on his face, and I was hearing the warning danger voices telling me he had his brother do it. A few days later, the pharmacy on Hammerley Street had called. I saw the number on my caller ID box that was on my phone. The warning danger voices told me it was about the checkbook, but I never investigated it. My checks had my phone number on them. I went to the bank and got a new account number. Finally, Twin was out of my life for good.